Day 1. The oath that changed everything. I stood there, my hand on the Bible, and I could feel the weight of 330 million souls pressing down on my shoulders. But you know what? I didn't break. I never break. The Chief Justice's voice echoed across the National Mall, but all I could hear was the roar of my own heartbeat. Thump, 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 like the drums in Where Have You Been? When I spoke those words, I do solemnly swear, I wasn't just becoming president, I was becoming something the world had never seen before. My mother was crying in the front row. I saw her. And in that moment, I remembered every single struggle, every night in Barbados when we didn't know if we'd have enough, every time someone told me I was too much or not enough. But here's what they didn't tell you on CNN, what they couldn't show you in those aerial shots of the crowd. As I turned to face America, I had already made a decision that would either save us all or destroy my presidency before it even began. What would you do if you had 100 days to change the world? Would you play it safe, or would you risk everything? The motorcade rolled toward the White House, and inside that armored vehicle, I opened a classified folder marked Urgent, Global Crisis Assessment. My chief of staff, Maria, a former Navy admiral I'd chosen specifically because she'd tell me the truth, even when it hurt, watched my face as I read. I felt the blood drain from my cheeks. 3 active conflicts, nuclear tensions at a 15-year high, climate disasters displacing millions, and buried on page 7, something that made my hands shake. Intelligence suggesting a coordinated attack was being planned, and we had less than 90 days to prevent it. Madam President, Maria said softly, her voice carrying the weight of 30 years of service. The world is watching. What's your first move? I looked out the tinted window at the crowd still celebrating, people waving flags, children on their parents' shoulders, hope in every face. They believed in me. They believed I could do this. But could I? The leather folder felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. We're going to do something no president has ever done, I said, my voice steady even though my soul was trembling. We're going to tell the truth. All of it. Day 3, the address that stopped the world. The Oval Office felt smaller than I'd imagined. Maybe because I'd filled it with light, literally. I'd had every heavy curtain removed, every dark portrait temporarily stored. If I was going to lead, I needed to see clearly, and I needed the world to see me clearly too. No shadows, no hiding. We're live in 30 seconds, Madam President, the production director said. I'd insisted on that. My own team, people who understood that this wasn't just a political address, this was a conversation. This was real. I looked directly into the camera, not at a teleprompter, not at notes. Just me, talking to you, talking to everyone. Good evening. I'm not going to waste your time with pleasantries or political theater. I'm going to tell you something that every president before me knew, but couldn't say. We're in trouble. Not just America, all of us, the entire human family. And I'm done pretending we're not. I could feel the tension through the camera lens, could imagine millions of people leaning forward, hands frozen over dinner plates, remote controls forgotten. In the next 90 days, we face challenges that could define the next century. But here's what I know that maybe you don't. We also have 90 days to do something extraordinary. I'm not talking about winning. I'm talking about surviving. Together. I paused, let that sink in. Then I did something unprecedented. I smiled, not a political smile, but a real one. The kind you give your best friend when you're about to do something crazy, but necessary. So here's my promise. I'm going to show you everything. Every meeting, every decision, every moment of doubt. I'm going to bring you into this office with me, because this isn't my presidency, it's ours. And the first thing we're going to do? We're going to end war. Not just one war, all of them. Can you imagine the phone calls that started flooding in after that? Can you picture the panic in the Pentagon, the confusion in foreign capitals, the hope in places where hope had died years ago? Day 7, the War Room Revelation. They called it the Situation Room, but I renamed it the Peace Command Center. My first week, and I'd already broken about 50 traditions. The military brass sat around the table, their faces carved from granite, their uniforms pressed so sharp they could cut. General Hawkins, a man who'd served under 4 presidents, spoke first. Madam President, with all due respect, ending all wars isn't a strategy. It's a fantasy. I leaned forward. The room smelled of coffee and tension, that sharp metallic scent of people who don't know if they're about to witness brilliance or catastrophe. General, tell me something. How many wars have we won in your lifetime? How many times have we declared mission accomplished only to be back in the same desert, the same jungle, the same God-forsaken conflict 10 years later? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I'm not talking about surrender. I'm not talking about weakness. I'm talking about something so radical it scares me, and it should scare you too. I'm talking about actually solving the problems that cause wars, instead of just managing the wars themselves. I pulled out a tablet, my own, not the government-issued one, and projected an image onto the screen. It was a photo from my last world tour, a little girl in Yemen, holding a sign that read, "Rihanna, please help us." This is Amira. She's 9 years old. When I met her backstage, her uncle worked venue security. She told me she wanted to be a singer like me. But you know what she said next? My voice caught, and I didn't try to hide it. She said she practices singing in the basement because it's the only place safe from the bombs. She's 9, and she's choosing between following her dreams and staying alive. The room was silent. You could hear the ventilation system humming, the soft rustle of someone shifting uncomfortably in their seat. So here's what we're going to do. I'm calling every world leader involved in every active conflict. And I'm not calling to negotiate, I'm calling to listen. Really listen. To understand what they actually need, not what their weapons manufacturers need, not what their political rivals demand, but what their people need to live without fear. Secretary of State Chen, a brilliant woman who'd spent 3 decades in diplomacy, finally spoke. Her voice was cautious, measured. Madam President, that's unprecedented. Some of these leaders, they're not going to what? Talk to me? Then I'll go to them, in person, all of them. Would you get on a plane to meet with someone the world called your enemy? Would you risk your life for the chance, just the chance, of peace? Day 14, the Moscow call. It was 3 a.m. when I made the call to President Volkov. My advisors had begged me not to. Too risky, too unpredictable, too everything. But here's what I'd learned in music. Sometimes the best collaborations come from the most unlikely partnerships. Sometimes you have to jam with someone whose style is nothing like yours to create something neither of you could make alone. The video connection flickered to life. Volkov appeared on screen, and I could see the surprise in his eyes. He'd expected formality, expected distance. What he got was me, in a Georgetown hoodie, with a cup of coffee, sitting in the residence like I was FaceTiming a friend. "President Volkov," I said in Russian. I'd learned it secretly over the past 6 months, anticipating this moment. "Thank you for taking my call at this ungodly hour." His eyebrows rose. "President Rihanna, your Russian is unexpected." "A lot about me is unexpected. That's kind of my brand." I smiled, then let it fade. "But I'm not calling to charm you. I'm calling because I'm terrified, and I think if you're honest, you are too." He said nothing, but something shifted in his expression. I continued. "I read the intelligence reports. I know about the nuclear tensions, the proxy conflicts, the rhetoric that gets louder every day. And I keep thinking, we're 2 people who have the power to end millions of lives with a phone call. Doesn't that keep you up at night? Because it's sure as hell keeping me up." Silence. Long, heavy silence. Then, "You are very different from your predecessors." "Yeah, well, they're not here anymore, and we are. So let me ask you something directly. What do you actually want? Not what your generals want, not what makes good TV. What do you want for your grandchildren?" I saw it then, a flicker of something human beneath the political mask. He had 3 grandchildren. I'd done my homework. "I want them to inherit a Russia that is respected, strong, secure. Okay, here's what I want. I want kids in America, Russia, everywhere to grow up without nightmares about nuclear war. I want them to inherit a planet that isn't burning. I want them to think we were brave enough to be honest with each other." I leaned closer to the camera. What if we started there? What if we just talked, really talked? No cameras, no press releases, no political points. Just 2 people trying to figure out how to not destroy everything. Day 21, the Middle East miracle. They said it couldn't be done. They said I was naive, reckless, dangerous. But on day 21, I landed in Jerusalem, then Tel Aviv, then Ramallah, then Damascus, then Tehran. 5 cities in 3 days, and the only weapon I carried was the truth. In a small room in Jerusalem, I sat across from Prime Minister Cohen. The air was thick with decades of pain, centuries of mistrust. But I didn't come with a peace plan drawn up by diplomats who'd never walked these streets. I came with questions. "Telephone. Tell me about your grandmother," I said. He blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Your grandmother. I read that she survived the Holocaust, that she came here with nothing but hope and a photograph. Tell me about her." And he did. For 20 minutes, this hardened political leader talked about a woman who taught him that survival wasn't enough. You had to build something beautiful from the ashes. When he finished, there were tears in his eyes. "Now I want to tell you about someone," I said. "Her name is Layla. She's a Palestinian poet I met in New York last year. Her grandmother also had to leave her home with nothing but a photograph. Different war, different year, but the same loss, the same pain." I watched his face. "I'm not here to say who's right or wrong about the past. I can't change the past. But I can ask you this. Don't your grandchildren and her grandchildren deserve better than inheriting our trauma?" The meeting in Ramallah was harder. President Masri was skeptical, angry, worn down by decades of broken promises. "You come here with your American optimism," he said, his voice sharp as broken glass. "But when you leave, the checkpoints remain. The walls remain. The occupation remains." "You're right," I said simply, "and that's not okay. But here's what I'm offering. Not promises, but presence. I'm not leaving until we have a framework that both sides can actually live with. Not a perfect solution, I'm not that naive, but something better than this." I spent 16 hours straight in negotiations. My staff begged me to rest, but how could I? Outside, real people were living with the consequences of our failures. The least I could do was lose a little sleep. Day 30, the Climate Alliance. By day 30, something was happening that no one had predicted. Not even me. Leaders who hadn't spoken in years were calling each other. Not because I'd forced them, but because they'd seen something. What if we actually tried? I convened an emergency climate summit. Not in some resort, not in some sterile conference center. In the Maldives. On an island that would be underwater in 20 years if we didn't act. Feel that? I asked the assembled presidents, prime ministers, and chancellors as we stood on the beach. The water lapped at our shoes. We'd all taken them off, standing in the sand together. That's our deadline. Not some abstract 2050 target. This, right here, right now. Chancellor Richter of Germany, a pragmatic woman who'd spent her career in climate science before entering politics, spoke up. "Madam President, the costs." "What's the cost of doing nothing?" I interrupted. "What's the cost in lives, in displacement, in wars fought over water and land?" Because that intelligence report I mentioned on day one, the coordinated attack we're trying to prevent, it's not about ideology. It's about resources, about desperate people fighting over what's left. I picked up a handful of sand, let it run through my fingers. The wind carried the salt spray, and for a moment, I was just a girl from Barbados again, remembering what it felt like to love the ocean, to fear it, to need it. Here's my proposal: the Global Peace and Sustainability Alliance. Every nation commits to cutting military spending by 25% over the next 5 years. That money, trillions of dollars, goes into renewable energy, water security, food stability, the things that actually keep people alive. That's political suicide in many of our countries, someone said. Maybe, or maybe it's the first honest thing we've done in decades. Maybe when people see their leaders actually choosing life over weapons, they'll demand more of it, not less. Day 45, the assassination attempt. I should have seen it coming, should have expected that someone, somewhere, would see peace as a threat to their power. But when the shots rang out during my speech in Chicago, my homecoming, my victory lap, time slowed down in that strange way it does when everything changes. The first bullet hit the podium. The second shattered the teleprompter. The third would have hit me if Agent Torres, a single mother of two who'd been on my detail since day one, hadn't thrown herself between me and the gunman. I felt her body impact mine, felt us both hit the ground, felt the chaos erupt around us. The smell of gunpowder mixed with her perfume. Something floral, something that reminded me of hope. She groaned, and I saw blood spreading across her shoulder. "No, no, no," I heard myself saying, my hands pressing against her wound while other agents swarmed us. "Stay with me, Carmen. Stay with me." They rushed us both to the hospital. I refused treatment until I knew she'd be okay. 4 hours of surgery. 4 hours of me in a waiting room, still wearing her blood, while the world went insane with speculation and fear. When the surgeon finally came out, when he told me she'd survive, I broke down. Right there in Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the President of the United States sat on the floor and sobbed. Not because I'd almost died, that wasn't what broke me. It was that someone was willing to die for this crazy dream of peace, that it mattered that much. Day 50, the choice. They wanted me to scale back, to be reasonable, to accept that change takes time, that I tried, that no one could blame me for returning to normal politics after nearly dying. But here's what they didn't understand. Normal had almost gotten me killed. Normal had gotten millions killed. Normal was the problem. I called another Oval Office address. This time, I was wearing Agent Torres's badge. She'd given it to me from her hospital bed, said I'd earned it, said I was the real Secret Service now, protecting the future. 50 days ago, I made you a promise. I said I'd end wars. Some of you laughed, some of you hoped, all of you watched. And here's what's happened. I pulled up a split screen. On one side, footage of troops beginning withdrawal from 3 conflict zones. On the other, images of the first solar farms being built with repurposed military budgets. But I'm not here to celebrate. I'm here to be honest. Someone tried to kill me 15 days ago. And in that moment, as I lay on that stage, I had a choice to make. Fear or faith. Give up or double down. Return to the way things were, or push even harder for the way things could be. I leaned forward, and this time I didn't hide the emotion in my voice. I chose faith. I chose you. I chose the possibility that maybe, just maybe, we're not as broken as we think we are. That maybe courage is contagious. That maybe one person standing up can inspire millions more. Day 60, the Youth Summit. I'd promised on day 1 to make this presidency transparent, to bring people into the room. On day 60, I delivered on that in the most literal way possible. I invited 500 young people from every country on earth to the White House. Not diplomats' kids, not the children of the elite, kids from refugee camps, From inner cities, from villages losing their glaciers and coastlines losing their homes. The ones who'd inherit whatever mess we left them. Amira from Yemen was there, the 9-year-old girl who wanted to sing. She'd grown in those 60 days, seemed older somehow, but her eyes still held that spark. She asked me a question during the open forum that silenced everyone. President Rihanna, my mother says that powerful people always promise peace and then forget. She says I shouldn't get my hopes up. Is she right? The entire East Room held its breath. Cameras from around the world focused on my face. I got down on one knee so I could look Amira in the eyes. Your mother is smart. She's lived through enough broken promises to be careful. But here's what I want you to know. I'm not promising you I'll fix everything. I'm promising you I'll try with everything I have. And when I fail, because I will sometimes, I'll get back up and try again. That's all any of us can do. Try, fail, try again, but never, ever give up. I stood back up, addressed the entire room of young faces. You want to know my real secret? You all are my accountability. Every decision I make, I think of you. I think, would I be proud to explain this to Amira, to Marcus, to Chen, to all of you? If the answer is no, I don't do it. You're not the future, you're the present, and I work for you. Day 75, the breakthrough. It came at 2 a.m. It always seemed to come at 2 a.m. President Volkov called me directly, not through diplomatic channels, not through a formal request, just called my personal line. I've been thinking about our conversation, he said without preamble, about my grandchildren, about what we're leaving them. And I want to propose something, a joint declaration, Russia and America together, announcing a 50% reduction in nuclear arsenals over the next 3 years. Not as enemies making concessions, but as partners choosing survival. I felt tears spring to my eyes. Are you serious? I am terrified of what you'll think I'm weak. My generals will think I've lost my mind. But you were right about something. What does strength matter if there's no world left to be strong in? We talked for 3 hours. By the time the sun rose, we'd sketched out an agreement that would have been unthinkable 90 days ago. But here's the thing about the unthinkable. Someone has to think it first. Day 85, the global broadcast. I'd saved the biggest gambit for last. On day 85, I arranged for a simultaneous broadcast in every country on Earth. Not a speech, a concert. Music is how I learned to speak truth, I explained to my bewildered staff. Music crosses borders. It doesn't care about your politics or your passport. It just reaches in and touches the part of you that's still human. We set up on the White House lawn. Artists from every continent, every genre, every background, and in the middle of it all, me, doing what I'd always done best, singing. But this time, with the weight of the world on my shoulders and the hope of millions in my voice. I sang Love the Way You Lie, reimagined as a song about humanity's toxic relationship with violence. I sang Diamonds as a prayer for the resilience we'd need. I sang Lift Me Up as a promise that we'd carry each other through. And then, for the finale, something I'd written in secret over those 85 days. A song called Day 100. It wasn't finished yet. The ending would depend on what we all did in the next 15 days. But the chorus went like this. We got 100 days to save ourselves, 100 ways to break these chains. And every single soul's a soldier now. In the only war that matters, the war for peace remains. Would you believe me if I told you that over 2 billion people watched that concert? That in living rooms, in bars, in refugee camps, in palaces, people stopped what they were doing and just listened. Day 95, the crisis. Of course, it couldn't be that simple. On day 95, the intelligence we'd been dreading came through. The coordinated attack was imminent. 3 simultaneous strikes planned in major cities across 3 continents. The goal? to derail the peace momentum, to prove that the old ways, fear, division, strength through violence, were the only ways that worked. I sat in the Peace Command Center, still refusing to call it the Situation Room, and looked at the faces around the table. These people had become more than my staff. They were believers. They were exhausted, hopeful, terrified believers. "We have two choices," I said quietly. "We can respond with traditional force, military strikes, martial law, everything the playbook says to do. Prove that we can be just as ruthless as anyone who threatens us. Or, or we do something crazy," Maria finished. She'd recovered from minor injuries in the assassination attempt and was back at my side, more determined than ever. "We invite them to the table." The room erupted. "Too dangerous, impossible, rewarding terrorism." Every objection you can imagine, I heard. But I let them speak, let them vent, and then I said something I'd been thinking about since day one. What if the only way to end the cycle of violence is to refuse to continue it? What if we call their bluff? We know who's planning this. We know where they are. And instead of sending drones, we send an invitation. "Come to Washington. Tell the world what you're fighting for. Let's see if we can find another way." "They'll think we're weak," General Hawkins said. "Let them. I'd rather be seen as weak and save thousands of lives than be seen as strong and continue this endless bloodshed. Besides," I smiled grimly, "I've been called worse things than weak. Haven't stopped me yet." Day 98, the impossible conversation. They came. Not all of them believed in good faith. Not all of them were ready to be convinced, but they came. I insisted on one condition. The conversation had to be live. The whole world would watch. In a secured, undisclosed location, because my Secret Service drew the line somewhere, I sat across from 5 men who'd planned to kill thousands. The air was sharp with suspicion, thick with barely contained rage. "Why?" I asked simply. Not the political rhetoric, not the manifestos. Why were you actually going to do this? The oldest one, a man named Samir, spoke first. His voice shook with fury and pain. "Because no one listens. Because we've tried everything else. Because our children are dying, and your peace talks are just more empty words from another leader who forget about us the moment it's politically convenient." I didn't flinch, didn't defend, just listened. Then, "You're right." That stopped him, stopped all of them. "You're right that leaders have failed you, that promises have been broken, that children are dying. You're right, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it took someone like me, someone from outside the system, to even try something different. I'm sorry that you felt violence was the only language anyone would hear." I leaned forward. "But here's what I need you to understand. Those bombs you were planning, they wouldn't have just killed people in Washington or London or Beijing. They would have killed the very peace process that might actually save your children. You would have won the battle and lost the war." "What peace process?" Samir spat. "Your photo opportunities? Your concerts? Our villages are still burning." "Then help me put out the fires. Really help me. Show me where the cameras need to go. Show me what needs to change. Join the process instead of trying to destroy it. Because I swear to you, and the whole world is watching me say this, I will not forget. I will not move on. I will not let this become just another news cycle." We talked for 6 hours, sometimes shouting, sometimes crying, sometimes sitting in heavy silence. And slowly, incredibly, something shifted. They started to believe, not in me, but in the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. Day 100, the reckoning. The sun rose on day 100, and I stood on the Truman balcony looking out at Washington. The city looked the same as it had 100 days ago, but everything had changed. Or maybe nothing had. Maybe I just started something that would take decades, centuries to complete. The threats that had driven those first frantic days had evolved. Some resolved, some still simmering, all of them requiring constant vigilance, constant work, constant faith that the impossible could inch closer to possible. I prepared a speech for this moment, but standing there in the early morning light, I realized I didn't need one. I pulled out my phone and went live on every social media platform. Day 100, I said simply. I made you promises. Some I kept, some I failed, but I'm still here, still fighting, still believing. I turned the camera to show the view, the monuments, the city, the world waking up. People keep asking me if I regret it. Regret running. Regret the risks. Regret thinking I could actually change things. And honestly, some days, yeah. Some days I'm so tired I can't remember why I thought this was a good idea. Some days I look at how much work is still ahead, and I want to cry. I turned the camera back to my face. I wasn't wearing makeup. My hair was in a simple ponytail. I was just me, just Robin Fenty from Barbados, who somehow became president and decided to try something crazy. But then I think about Amira, who's singing again, about the troops coming home, about President Volkov and I announcing nuclear reductions yesterday, about the solar farms replacing military bases, about the conversations happening in places where there was only silence before. And I think, this is why. I saw Agent Torres appear in the doorway, back on duty despite her injury. She gave me a thumbs up. Time for the official ceremony. I've got 100 more days ahead, and 100 after that. And this work, it's not going to be finished in my lifetime. Maybe not in any of our lifetimes. But we started it, together. And that's everything. I took one last look at the sunrise. I don't know what day 101 will bring, what day 1000 will bring. But I know this. We're going to face it together. Not as nations, not as enemies, but as people who decided that the old ways weren't working and that we were brave enough to try something new. I smiled then, a real smile, the kind I used to give at the end of concerts when I was exhausted and exhilarated and completely alive. To everyone watching, this isn't my presidency anymore. It was never mine. It's ours. And the first 100 days, they were just the beginning.